when using the chat feature, this will actually be helpful information now that the chat feature is functional. Um, Make sure you have it set to the to field to all panelists and attendees instead of just all panels. That way you get to actually converse with one another throughout today's webinar. And we will be doing fielding questions at the end through Q&A feature. So we will keep an eye on that. And I'll see if there's anything that perhaps needs to get to Martha and Cynthia's attention. But prior to that, but they have a lot of content to go through. So we really want to give them the space that they need to do that. And we will go ahead and get started. Next slide, please. Hi, everyone. So I'm Rachel Ostergaard. I'll do another introduction here in a minute. I'm the Senior Housing Program Manager, Project Manager here at the Freedom Network. But we do like to start each of our presentations with a land acknowledgement because the land that we are all on was not initially ours, at least most of ours. And I'm located in the Chicagoland area in downtown Chicago right now. And we are currently on the traditional lands of Peoria, Kaskaskia, Potawatomi, and the Kickapoo people. And we pay our respects to the past, present, and future of those people. And I do think it is important, particularly with all the things going on in the world right now, that we acknowledge the people who held this land prior to us being here. So you can look up if you're curious more about that, you can check out that link there and find out who were the original folks on the land where you are all located. Next slide. Another just tools, this is a little visual to help. If you were wondering about that chat, all panelists and attendees, there's a little icon. I'm personally a visual person, so I like visuals like this. All panelists and attendees, that's where you need to do that. Next slide. And then just a little bit more. So this training is hosted by Freedom Network Training Institute, and we are the Freedom Network Training Institute housing and training and technical assistance part. So a big part of the work that we do is provide and host these web-based trainings. We have a resource library, which I'll drop the link there at the end, so you can have access to all of our resources online. And we do provide technical training and technical assistance to OVC housing grantees in particular. So folks who have OVC funding to provide housing to survivors of trafficking throughout the country. If you're not an OVC grantee, well, keep an eye out for solicitations, and there's always another one. So we'll come up again next spring or in the winter. Also, if you are providing housing, please also reach out and we can get you connected to resources as well. But our primary focus and funding is to provide that technical assistance to OVC grantees. Next slide. So just a little bit about Freedom Network, in case you're not familiar. We are a national membership organization of 101 organizations and individuals, and you can see on this map where our people are. We would love to have folks in all represented throughout the country. And I will say, as a service provider in my previous life, having this network of folks was really helpful because the survivors that we work with go from one place to another. And I could be like, hey, team of Freedom Network members, I have a survivor who needs this resource in Arizona. Who are your trusted partners? And so that's really great. We work to address both labor and sex trafficking through policy work, training, and technical assistance and capacity building. And we really do prioritize, as an organization, we prioritize self-determination, choice, and person-centered support. And also part of that is really working to address root causes to prevent exploitation. We don't want to just band-aid things and provide that immediate response, although that's important, but we also really want to think about what are the root causes of trafficking and how can we help keep people out of those situations to begin with. Next slide. And then this is where I will then pass it over to Martha and Cynthia. I already done a lot of chatting. My name is Rachel Ostergaard. I'm the Senior Housing Project Manager here at Freedom Network. I come from many years of doing direct service, and now I'm here in this role to provide support to folks who are providing the very important work of housing survivors of human trafficking. And then I'll pass it over to Martha and Cynthia so they can do their own brief introductions.
Well, thank you, Rachel. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning, whatever region of the country you are. I am Marta Hernandez Martinez. I use the pronoun she, her, ella. I am sharing this space with you from the land of the Ojibwe, Dakota, Lakota people in Minneapolis. Humbled to be here because I admire the work that you do. I have been a researcher and evaluator in the domestic violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking field for the last 10, 20 years of my career. And recently I transitioned to rainbow research. We are humble with this opportunity to chat with you about this topic about action research, and then you are giving us your time. And with that, I pass to my colleague, Cynthia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cynthia Matthias. I am an evaluator with the Minnesota Department of Health with the Human Trafficking Prevention Program in the Violence Prevention Programs Unit. I am a researcher and evaluator. My background is in youth work. I was a librarian for many years, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to you all about research, action research today. You do really important work, and I love doing research, and I hope that we can present something that you'll find really useful in your daily work to support folks. Thanks.
Thank you. And with that, can we please change to the next slide? Okay, so seems to be, okay, thank you. Technology is testing us today. So as Rachel mentioned earlier, we would like to know who is here when asked, what is the organization and the role that you played? What is the general geographic location where you are? But most important than anything else, we would like to know and to hear why you hope to get out of this webinar today when asked. What are you hoping that is going to be helpful for your work? So it will be great to have that. And with that, if you please, can we jump to the next one? Previous one, next one, thank you. So our goal for today include learning together. We will be asking you to share your thoughts, ideas with the group, but also we will make sure, and we want to remind you, that we want you to feel comfortable. You can share whatever you want to share, and remind ourselves that whatever we share in this space will remain in this space. So to make sure that we have an agreement about that, we have created these guidelines or community agreements for today's conversation. So with that, I would like to say that we will remain open, and please, let's listen and let's assume with good intent. Listen to understand each other. Please ask questions, clarify questions, no? We always express things in one way or another in our own circles that it might have different meaning for other people. And once again, and I know that I am in a circle of trust here, but let's remind ourselves how important is confidentiality in the work that we do every day. And with that, we want to invite you that if there is something else that you would like to ask to this community agreement, are we missing something? Please feel free to share that in the chat. If you feel that we are missing something, once again, please feel free to ask in the chat. And with that, please, next one. As I said earlier, we had a few goals for today, no? So one of the most important for us is that you understand what action research is. Recognize how action research can be useful for your housing program. Learn the basic elements of the action research process. Identify what you need get at the action research project start. Recognize how the results of action research can be used to improve services delivered and gather data for your grant reporting requirements, and reflect with us on what we had talked about it today. Our goal is that you get out here feeling that you have an understanding and are able to utilize this tool for your work every day. Next one, please. And with that, we would like to start by asking you if you have had any previous experience with action research. If you please can share that in the chat. Oh, thank you. Yes, we actually have a poll. If you can answer our poll about if you have had any experience with action research. And what kind of experience was that? If that was a positive or negative experience. Thank you to our participants. What I can see right now, some of you not sure if you have experience. And some of you are telling us that you didn't have experience. Most of you not sure. And most of you not sure if it was a positive or negative experience, not sure. But thank you very much for your answer. So, and with that, let's start this journey of learning what is action research, and I pass to my colleague, Cynthia.
All right, next slide, please. Thanks. So I'm going to explain what action research is. There will not be a quiz on this. Our goal here, as Martha said, is just to give you some basic understanding of what this is so that you can go out and do it. So if you could go next slide, please. So let's just talk about research to start with. I have a bunch of graduate school training, and when we talk about research there, and you may hear it talked about this way, we talk about it as systematic inquiry into a situation in order to better understand what is happening in that situation. Next slide, please. So what that really means in normal language is we are asking questions and gathering information about something to understand how it works. So since many of you are program folks, you may be familiar with evaluation or evaluation research in relationship to grant programs you may be running. And a lot of that kind of research is focused on what your program is doing and the kinds of outcomes your clients or participants are achieving, and sort of figuring out what works and what doesn't work for you. In some settings, linear research is really linear. So like you do the activities, you document what the outcomes are, and then you report it. You start with a question, you find the answer, you analyze the data, that's it. There's a start and an end. Next question, or next slide, please. So action research is a little bit different. It is the research that is conducted with and by people closest to the program. So that includes program staff. It includes survivors or folks receiving services. The focus of your research questions, the questions you're asking and hoping to answer, are on questions that those folks have. So the program staff, like you're doing the work every day, you know what's going on, your participants know what's going on. What questions might they have about what's happening in the program, what can be improved? So the goal of this kind of research is to identify changes that you can make right now in what you're doing to improve processes, to improve the experience that program participants are having. You decide what the goals are. Is there something that you can change that will support the staff in their daily work? Is there something that you can change that'll make it easier for your participants to access services, or some combination of both? And the research process in action research takes advantage of data that you may already be collecting, that you have to gather as an intake or as an exit, things that you may need to report to your funders. And the process here isn't necessarily linear. Like you may have a research question, you may want to figure out why something isn't working or how it could work better, and then you make some changes and try it out and decide that you need to learn some more about what's going on, or maybe you have a different question now. So it can be a start to finish project, but more often it's something that's sort of ongoing and you're gathering information as you work. But the point here is that anyone who does action research is doing it for the benefit of the people who are in that particular setting. It's not being conducted so that someone can publish a paper and get tenure. It's not about anything like that. I mean, you can publish your research if you like, but the primary goal is to improve your service, improve processes, make things work better in your organization and in your program. Next slide, please. So Martha and I are very fond of food analogies. So one way to think about the difference between action research and regular research is you're making soup that your grandma has always made and she's well known for making, and you're going to cook it for her for the first time. So your research question is, does the soup that you made taste like your grandma's soup? So next question, or slide, sorry. So a quote unquote traditional research approach, under that paradigm, your research question is, does the soup taste like grandma's soup? So your data collection to answer that research question is serve grandma the soup and see what she says. And the result of that experiment is grandma says, this tastes nothing like my soup. And what happens after that? Can you make a recommendation? I mean, there's no action you can take. Grandma thinks you can't cook, and like every time your family gets together for the rest of your life, they make jokes about how you like tried to make grandma's soup that one time and it was terrible. So not necessarily a productive research process. Next slide, please. A action research approach also asks the research question, does the soup that I made taste like grandma's soup? For data collection, before grandma shows up, you ask other people to taste the soup. You ask your brothers and sisters, your parents, your aunts and uncles, taste the soup and say, does it taste like soup that grandma makes? The result is they say it needs more spices of some kind. And so before you present the soup to grandma, you have a chance to adjust the seasoning, and you serve grandma and she says it's great. So the difference is there's some data gathering before you have the final result, and you can make changes from what you learn. So that's the goal here of what we're hoping to talk to you about today. Next slide, please. So OVC has a bunch of really useful resources on doing this kind of research, and I believe the links for those will be included at the end of the slides. But this is from one of their publications, and it presents action research as sort of a cycle. So you implement something, maybe you start out the program, you use research methods to sort of ask questions about the program because something might not be working or you think it could work better. And then you work with people the most closely involved with that program to design a study, to gather information, and to decide what you're going to do with the results. So they think of it as a cycle because it's not linear. You may start over again, you may stop in the process and return to a previous step. Just the goal is to make it sort of iterative and to learn what you need to learn. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, sorry, next slide, please, after this one. Oh, could you go to the next slide, please? Thanks. So this may sound like a lot of work right now, so you may be wondering why it's important to take this kind of approach. And action research is a little bit different from maybe evaluation or something that's imposed on you, and that you can really focus on what your organization or program or staff or participants really want to learn. You all have the expertise of doing this work every day. Folks have expertise from their experience. So they know what happens in the program, what the benefits are, where there are barriers or challenges. And that way, when you come together to ask questions about it and propose solutions, the things that you might want to change, it's actually feasible to change. You can actually identify things that are within your purview or your capacity to change. You know what your limits are. And it's almost sort of a bonus that what you learn in this process, you can also use for your grant reporting purposes. Next slide, please. So in doing action research, you will learn more about what's going on in your program while you're running your program. And you may learn things about how there are barriers for your participants in accessing services or even, in their interactions with staff. And, the goal is to sort of make things better for everybody that's involved in the programming, help staff figure out how to deliver services better. Maybe they're simple fixes, maybe they're more long-term fixes, but the goal again is to maximize the benefit of work you're doing and on your own terms, to understand in your own terms and then to implement changes on your own terms. Really, it sounds like it might be scary, but really the goal is not to make more work for staff in the program and in the organization. So, think about the goals that when you're designing the study, think about the goals that you would like to achieve within your program or organization. Next slide, please. So I just want to pause real quickly and just check in and see if there are any questions or concerns so far. You don't have to share them, but if you want to, please feel free to put them in the chat. The chat will be saved as part of this presentation, so we can go back and look at your questions later, but I just wanted to give folks a minute if they needed it. All right, well, we'll keep going then if everyone is feeling all right. Could you go next slide, please? So now I'll pass it back to Martha, who's going to start talking us through the action research process, the actual steps.
Thank you, Cynthia. So let's go. Let's start thinking about that food. Let's start thinking about that cooking. Next slide, please. As Cynthia mentioned, action research is a little bit different than the traditional research because it's not linear. As we can see, one of the image and one of the tools that have been shared with you in the chat, it demonstrated that it's a circular process. But it's a circular process also that it can be adapted to your need. You don't have to be tied to one specific step. You might find yourself already doing what is required in the second steps, that is gathering data, and just want to jump about implemented what you need to do, what you have learned from the data that you have at hand. So it's like knowing this whole thing about you are cooking, you know that it's going to be a soup. You might think that it was a tomato soup, but you find out in the process that you didn't have tomatoes, but you have all the ingredients just for a vegetable soup. So we just don't call it that time a tomato soup, but it's still the vegetable soup. Despite this, sometimes and some people call tomatoes a fruit. But anyway, what I was trying to say is that it's very flexible, it's very adaptable. And that's the part that we think that is more appealing for the kind of work that you do. So now, please let me use an example and take you through the different steps of this process. Next slide, please. Well, as we move, thank you. As we move to the next slide, so what we're gonna try to use is a scenario. This is gonna be a hypothetical organization. And excuse me, if any of you work for Aurora, we are here located in the Midwest. And as you know, Aurora Borealis, a beautiful nature event in our lives, happen all the time around here. So we are happy to promote and talk about Aurora. Yeah, but as you can see, so we are thinking about this hypothetical organization, Aurora, that it has a housing program that is stated as a goal serving traffic and survivors in a certain geographic area, including those survivors who have physical or cognitive or emotional disabilities. Given the constraints of our time, this is going to be a high-level example. So if you have any questions, we are more than happy to answer your questions or follow up with you. So next slide, please. So once again, revisiting the whole diagram of the process, no? So we start with the first step, that is about choosing a focus of what is the thing that we need to know or we want to know, and choosing that partner. Next slide, please. Why we start with the focus and the partner? Because it's in this moment that we ask among ourselves, what is what we want to know? What is what we need to learn? What are the things that they are needed? What are the patterns that are emerging from our day-to-day work? What are our staffing noticing? What they are hearing people talking about it? What the co-workers are sharing among themselves during their break times about work difficulties? Are the same kind of comments or feedbacks coming from program participants, or different participants are asking different questions? or participants that they are in different programs in our organization are asking the similar question. The things that you notice might lead to a big high-level questions to start when you start thinking about this, such as, are participants raising low? Why is that? What are your clients following through our own referrals? These type of questions are good to start on a starting place, but they are big and may produce answers that you might not be able to address when your scope of work at your organization. It may be useful to do some brainstorming, or kick around ideas with your team. This is when you bring your whole team, your co-workers, and start asking yourself multiple questions. Next slide, please. This is when you start focusing on this. What is the what? Program staff wonder why participants are withdrawn from the program early on, shortly after they enter the emergency rehousing program. Next slide, please. A review of participant intake information of withdrawal. Participants shows they all identify as having a disability. Program staff are puzzled. What's going on here? As they have had extensive training and can provide referrals and accommodation. Next slide, please. So here is where the action reserve start in place, start function, kicking, yeah? Because as your staff get together and try to focus on what is going on, so you start asking these big general questions. Why are some participants withdraw from the program early on? And as you, when you start reviewing the documentation, that reveals that the withdrawal is the most part, the people that withdraw from your program indicated in their notes to you that they have some kind of disability. So, which take us to the second question. Okay, so they are telling us why they are leaving. But why are participants with disability withdrawn from the program early on? A further investigation, a further review of all the documentation materials that you have, it revealed that they have indicated that they had disability, but you are unclear, you are not receiving information about what kind of barriers they are facing, no? What are the reasons or the accommodations that they are not there present and they are forcing them to leave the program? So that's how when you start narrow to the third question, what are those potential barriers or challenges are causing that these participants with disability to struggle in the first stage of housing? Next one, please. So then is when you move to the partner to identify. So now you know the focus. They are leaving. I need to find somebody who help me to find the answer to resolve this problem. Yeah. So then is when you start to identify who can support you, who can help you to know what you need to know, who is having similar issues, who has the information in the community, who is the trusted partner that you can reach out in the community to gather information, to gather resources to resolve the problem. This is also an opportunity to know what is in your community. If you already don't know, what are the resources available? Who is the people working on the similar issue? Who is talking about this problem? And more than anything else, who have been presented a solution? Because the intention here is that you don't have to invent the wheel. You just have to utilize what is available, what are the resources, when the people, now that you are focused on what is the problem that you need to address. Next one, please. And thinking about resources and opportunity. When you look around your community, in the case of a hypothetical organization, Aurora, one of the important things that you need to keep in mind is who can be your potential partners, no? Who are those members of the community? Maybe you find out that you are located in a place where there is a university who have already dedicated time and effort to working with the community that experience disability. Maybe you have a local leader who's advocating around for many years and he had the trust and the respect of the community for the work that they are trying to do. And he had probably been conducting action research. Or your local small evaluator firm of people who are doing research in small community organizations in your neighborhood, who also might be in partnership working with parents and advocates to try to resolve problems for their daughters, for their sons, related to the physical disabilities. So once again, is to see what is available, then it can support you to address the problem that you have. Next slide, please. Which this it take us to the second step. Now that you have accomplished your first step, that is focus what I want to do, finding that partner that it can support me in this effort. So we move to the point of how I gonna generate the knowledge through the data that I might have or I might need to collect to do this work, to answer to this problem that I'm facing. Next slide, please. So this is where we move to what we researchers and evaluators denominate or call design and study, no? Design what we're gonna do, lay out the steps that we're gonna take to prepare that delicious soup or to resolve that problem that we are facing. So we start with many things, no? We start by reviewing, for example, what is the logic model. Then it may ask to figure out where we need to ask questions and where the data then it came from to answer those questions. It's likely that you are already collecting an enormous amount of data. Think about the intake form. What a source of information contained. And in those forms may help you to pose questions or serve as a data to analyze. Is the data that you are required to collect for reporting, for example, the performance measures tracking, is offering some information about who are the survivors that they are coming to your services, what kind of experience with disability they have been reported previously. Those little details then help you to see, okay, so how am I gonna conduct this action research? Sometimes you can use that present data. That's what we call it the double dipping, yeah? We are using what we have in front of us for a different, for multiple purposes, no? Is facilitating your work, reducing, not duplicating, avoiding extra effort for what you do. And perhaps that will help you that you don't need to collect any additional data. You just need to review what you had with a different lens, with a different set of questions, and in partnership when somebody giving you the extra eyes to ask these questions about what I had is helpful or not. Is that why we will reemphasize here that it's important that you have that local partner, the local community college or university or research firm, then it can be you, second eyes in these efforts, an extra hand to support you. Next one, please. As part of the second step, we consider that, and just a reminder, because we are very aware and clear about all the different regulations and requirements of how data is collected in the field. But it's always good to remind ourselves, and especially if you are establishing a relation with a partner, and it's a partner, either a university, a technical college, or a research firm that is not very familiar with all the different regulations that exist about confidentiality in the field. So it's good to check it out with them. It's good to ask them the questions. Is there practices, how they collect data, how they manage the data, how they report the data, is in alignment with VAWA, with the Violence Against Women Act, when FICSA, when the Family Violence o en boca, yeah? What are those rules? What are those practices that they have in place? And if those practices are in alignment. Also the interaction, check it out how people collect data, how people ask questions, how people create their questionnaires, their surveys, if they are trauma informed, yeah? Do they really need to ask these kind of questions? Is it necessarily to ask a person the same question multiple times? Yeah? So that attention to those details. Another thing that is super important, and sometimes we take it for granted, or in the rush of creating tools, we don't pay the necessary attention, is the accessibility. Are we making all the necessary effort to secure that all the material is accessible, that people can read, that people can see the letters, that people can understand the jargon, the language utilized in those questions, in those listening sessions, in those intake forms, yeah? Let's dedicate some time to that. And finally, are we making sure that everybody is participate and can understand and can communicate with us? Do we have in place those language access standards? Then it will get us the opportunity to hear from their voices what they are experiencing. What a person with disability, then English perhaps is not the first language, is experiencing, then force them to withdraw from your program early on, or not getting all the necessary benefits that your program have been designed and you have been trained to provide to them. So please pay attention to that. That partnership has to be an equal respect for partnership. And the way that you partner, collect the data, and the ethical practice that they have in place will also influence your work. Next one, please. So here we go again, also in a little more detail about the data collection. If you decide after you review what you have in place, intake forms, questionnaires, measures, that you need to collect additional data, who will collect that data? Do you have the resources to invest in creating new data tools, new data collection tool? When and where it will be collected? When it's going to be the time? Yeah, it's going to be an extra hour that your staff is going to have to spend reviewing and collecting that new data, or you're going to utilize that partner that is going to have more flexibility to collect that data for you. When it's going to be a quantitative, qualitative data, are you going to searching for numbers, for frequencies, for average, or are you going to search for conversations, for language, for message that people in your organizations is giving to you? Those little note cards of thank you very much for the service that you gave me, or that little note asking why can I don't get access to this? Those pieces of data that they are there. And once again, think about it, utilize a researcher as a partner, but a partner that is in equal terms and in clear understandings of the opportunities and limitations in the fields. So next one, please. So in our case of organization, our hypothetical organization, Aurora, we decided to do a study and collect the data. We decided that it was beneficial in this case, just go for a qualitative study, just gathering the response by hand, asking questions to people directly to them about what are the needs and strengths, that we see in our intake questionnaire. We check about the responses bi-weekly in combos when case managers, we discuss with them what we are seeing there, what you notice, what we see then is a robust question, a good question that is going to get us good answers, so a question that we need to tweak, adapt, adjust. Do we need to add in 2 additional more questions for the conversations? We need to make sure that the questions have good prompts that is going to enable the conversation when the participants. Yeah? So those little details are the details that we put in place when we do the design and the collections of the data. Next, please. So now we're going to move to what is the implementation of this design, this data collection process, this partnership, how they look like when we are in the kitchen mixing and preparing the soup. And with that, I pass to my colleague Cynthia.
Thanks, Martha. So, yep. So now we've designed the study. So now we're going to, plan sort of the next steps. So if you go to the next slide, please. So this what the diagram refers to as action planning is we're thinking about as sort of planning next steps. So you've collected the data by looking at your intake form and by adding a couple questions to the sort of check-in questionnaire that case managers do with the participants. So you've gathered all this data. So it's good to go through it all together as a group. You can assemble a research team among program staff, maybe some folks from the community or from your pool of participants, whatever you think determine is appropriate. And it is important, though, to sort of look at the data together and talk about it, because everyone is going to interpret things differently, and there are many valid viewpoints on any given situation. So as you look at the data, what patterns do you see emerging? Are there the same things happening over and over again? Are you kind of seeing things all over the place, responses all over the place? When looking at all this data together, you should discuss, maybe we should change this thing or that thing, but what's feasible. No one is telling you you need to change this or that. You decide what can you do within the bounds of your program or in your organization. And then you develop a plan to implement those changes. So an important question there is, how are you going to measure how much change has occurred and then what the outcome of those changes are? Next slide, please. So in the case of Aurora, or hypothetical organization, they convened a research team that involves their community partner, some direct service staff, and some community advocates who've been working with them in doing training and technical assistance. And they compile all the results from the responses from the intake survey and from the sort of check-in questionnaire. And they notice some recurring things, the same sorts of things keep popping up. The research team then meets with the broader staff in the organization to talk about what they've seen, and the staff works together to decide what potential things, what potential actions they could take, what potential changes they could make. And they decide as a group to seek additional technical assistance from advocacy groups in the community that work with people with cognitive disabilities. They work with these organizations to tweak some of the written instructions in the documents they provide for folks. And they work with an organization to address some basic physical accessibility issues in their building for when folks come in for case management meetings. It turns out there's some barriers there. So they're going to work with an advocacy group to see what they can change. Next slide, please. So that's the sort of action planning. They've reviewed the data. They've made a plan to, change a few things, take some different actions, and they are going to implement that action plan. So I will pass back to Martha for step 4.
So now, next one, please. So now is the moment in which we have learned what it needed to happen, and we need to ask ourselves, are there change affecting what's happening? Is the staff getting the feedback? How it's going? Are they output different from before? Is the staff seeing how people are remaining in the program more? No, there's no that withdrawal right than we saw early on. We notice that we are more attentive gathering the data than is telling us what are their needs and how can we make the adjustments in the everyday practice, how we can provide some extra service that we didn't have before. are we getting a clear idea if the organization has or not the capacity? Yeah. So if we need to hire new people, if we need more financial resources, yeah, if the time allocated to work in a specific task to facilitate the services for the people with disabilities are enough, no? Is there any troubleshooting required to require? Do we need to make an adjustment? Well, we thought that it was an effective change or twist, and the form is not really giving us what we expected. So it's the moment to adjust, it's the moment to change. Next one, please. So how does it look in this Aurora implementation? No? Checking staff about additional training received and was it useful. After doing some training, do they see where change could be made in their work? We recognize that the staff needed to receive some extra trainings. We get those training and we ask our staff, how are you feeling now? How's the work every day happening? Local organizations are helping Aurora edit some of the documents because we realized that the documents were not really accessible despite of our initial notion, no? Initial impression that the language was clear, the material were clear, but having the chance and the benefit of that partnership show us that there was room for improvement, no? And some participants began to raise specific questions, no? Then it brought out the staff to address those quickly. Now our participants can tell us without much difficulty what it needed to happen, what are the changes that they need. Those small changes are making room for the staff to meet more when participants, to comment when participants. And we see the participants more calm and feel safe and participating in the activities, gaining more confidence, gaining more knowledge, getting ready to recover in their life. Yeah. So, and those are result of the little tweaks or the big tweaks that they are possible thanks to what we learned through action research. Next one, please. And one important thing that we were gonna discuss is about reflecting on how we share or report about these changes that we do. Yeah, because it's not just about going through the different steps of digging into what we know, getting the support of the people to do this digging, getting to examine what we collect, what we know, what we are doing, putting those in practice, no? Develop a plan and then put it in practice, but it's also about how we share those. And when that, Cynthia, please.
Thanks. Next slide, please. Oops, back it up. One more. Okay, thanks. So the sort of final, and it may not be final, but a step they list as step 5 is to reflect on what you've done and report findings. So this is an opportunity to sort of look back over what both the work that you've done and the research you've done on your work, to sort of look at what are the strengths and weaknesses you observed, both in your program and in the changes that you've implemented. What have you achieved with the program now that you've made some of these tweaks? Are different outcomes occurring? Are you noticing different patterns or different things? Have you found places where you need to build capacity in your organization? Is there additional training? Do you need to seek funding for another position? Is your physical space adequate? Does it need to be in a different location? And what lessons have you learned in this process that you can, take within your organization, but that you can also share with others who are doing similar work? One way to think about reporting out is, yes, you have to do it for your funder. You have to do it as part of your, federal grant obligations. But another way to think about reporting is sharing what you learn to build buy-in for the work that you're doing. So I used to do programming with youth, and we frequently had to talk about the work we were doing as a way of managing up to our supervisors and the administration, just letting folks know what we were doing, what our successes and our accomplishments were, and what further support we might need. And I know many of you have been doing this work for a long time, so you probably know that already. But I also want to say that reporting isn't something that you just do at the end and it's done. It's a tool you can use. You can tell the story of your work, of what you're doing, of what you've accomplished. You can tell some stories to help people understand the communities that you work with. And all of that can come from this data that you're collecting as part of your research and is learning more about your programs and your clients, your program participants, like what's happening in their lives and what challenges they're experiencing, what successes they're having. All of this goes into a story about what your program is doing. Again, it sounds like it's a lot of work, but it's just something to think about going forward, is that the reporting is actually a tool. It's a thing you have to do, but it's also something you can use. And then you can share with others, because there are a lot of folks working really hard on trying to address these issues, and it's a way to help support your colleagues and the field. Next slide, please. So the example here we have of Aurora's reporting is that the staff report on changes that they've made in their just sort of internal processes, in how they handle things, in the office, but then also in how they work with participants. They also report the responses that the participants have had, the comments that participants have made in response to the changes that they've made. They make a presentation, to maybe their board, but they also make a presentation to the different advocacy groups in town that they've worked with and other folks who might make referrals to their organization. And those presentations are opportunities to get feedback from these community partners and possibly build new partnerships and strengthen relationships with these organizations so that they could work together more and better in the future. Next slide, please. And so voila, like that's your action research project. It seems really simple, right? I mean, we just threw a whole bunch of information at you, and it may seem like just a huge thing to do on top of the work that you have to do every day that is very important. But you don't have to remember everything we showed you, and you don't have to do it all by yourself. There are resources within your community, within your organization. There are resources that Freedom Network has been dropping some links there. There's opportunities for technical assistance. There are people to support this work that we're suggesting that you do. So you're not alone, and it's not magic. Anyone can do it. Just take some time to think things through and work things out, and to make some space for yourself and your staff and your participants to think about what you really want to change and what you really can't change. So I'm just going to pass back to Martha to highlight some key takeaways that we discussed today.
Next, thank you, Cynthia. Next slide, please. Today we want you to think about this. First of all, your staff and participants are the experts in your context. I am located in Minneapolis. I cannot really say that I will know what is the context of somebody working in Pennsylvania, in Florida, in California, in all those different places that you are joining us this morning. So it's important to be clear and reaffirm that you are the expert over there. Also, that if you are able, if you had the chance to utilize this tool, Action Research is just a tool for you to serve you, then you are clear about what you want to learn and what is in the side of the scope of your questions and in the scope of your work, no? We always have big questions. How can we resolve this big problem? But the beauty of Action Research is actually, what can I resolve today that is in my hands, and I can do it with my team, and allow you to ask that kind of question, yeah? What is the problem when the people who was in my program and they are leaving early? What's happening with that? Yeah. You can act, you can take an action, a direct action. Also, if you happen to partner with a research person or a research firm or an institution, either a technical college and a university, You need to make sure, please make sure that they understand your context and they respect your expertise. Through my years of research and evaluation, I had noticed sometimes how we come to this table with some assumptions that we know everything, and we should remain silent and learn for those who are doing the work every day. You have so much knowledge, and we should be attentive and recognize that knowledge. And also, how this tool can help you to shape what you have capacity to do. No? What am I really able to do when 10, 5, 3 staff person, that it has such a workload that it only allow me to do this, no? Or to identify that I only have 3 people where I might need 6 people to do the work. So in those spaces and opportunities where you can use action research, I invite you to do it. But when that clarity, that is to serve you, not to add more to your work. Next one, please. Also, as we hear, and my colleague Cynthia mentioned a couple of times, we all have obligations, you know. We all receive funding to provide the services that we are doing. So how can you use action research, all the data that you're gathering every single day, utilize the double dipping to report, to fulfill all your requirements, no? Without having to create an extra tool, without having to make an extra effort. And also, the audience, how you disseminate. Do you develop a dissemination plan? Then it's just a fancy way to say when who you're gonna share this information, because you think that people might benefit of learning of your experience, or people might support you if they are able to see the problems, the challenges, the barriers that you were facing, and how you were trying to address those, how you were trying to find remedies to those barriers, no? And a good way to do that is by sharing. Like we will think about it, and is the soup that grandma taught us to do it tastes good, and grandma approved it, why not to share that with our neighbors? Why not to bring it to the potluck? Who knows? We might learn a new trick, a new ingredient that it can be added to the soup, and it will make this soup more delicious. And with that, next slide, please. So we would like to invite you to some final reflections to us, you know? We would like to hear from you about if there is something that made you exciting about action research. If there was something that you would like to learn more about it. If it's this something that made you anxious about action research, you know? We all had those moments that we are preparing ourselves for something, and we feel that we are ready, but then something occur, and this anxiety about, are we gonna do it? Are we gonna mix the ingredients well or no? And what is gonna be the result? And what are some key ideas you will take back to your organization from this presentation? So please feel free to share with us your comments and questions in the chat. And once again, I want to reinvigorate, and if you want to keep in touch with us, if there was something that we didn't address today, we are here to support you, and we welcome your emails, and I'm sure the great staff of Freedom Network will make sure that we receive those questions from you. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Thank you both so much. Waiting to see if there are any questions that come up in the Q&A. And as I was like listening and reflecting back in a previous lifetime of mine when I worked here in Chicago with the program, and we had an action research project for our task force. And it was just interesting to reflect back on that, because it was real, it really was so helpful. We did it over a course of a couple of years, and I came in towards the middle of it to be more involved, but like it was really so helpful to have that information and to have that research done. And like it helped confirm things that we knew we suspected were gaps in the way that we were doing things. And it helped like solidify that and then helped us come up with a plan on how to meet those gaps. And so I just like really encourage folks to, I think it can be kind of intimidating, especially if you're not a researcher, especially if this feels like outside of your like purview, especially in programs, we're up to our eyeballs and all these things all the time. But once that information came out and the research was completed, it was really a helpful tool for us to improve the way we did things. And then also, I like what Cynthia said, and then also Martha like echoed this like sharing out this information and managing up almost like, okay, helping like it's more powerful isn't quite the word I'm going for, but it has a little more punch to it. If you can say that things that aren't just your opinions about your program, but also like, hey, there's this research, we did this process, and these are the results, and this is what we see as going well, and this is what we're, oh, I get blurry, or these are the gaps that we have, and we need you to step in and help with these gaps more specifically. So I found it really helpful on a number of different levels. So again, kind of just going what was said about if you have more questions or wanting to get more involved, like it really is very helpful for programs who are doing this work. Um, I'll say the quiet crew today, and I feel like it's a strange day in the world. I also might be saying that because I'm in Chicago and it's everything is DNC everything here right now. But I did put a link to the Freedom Network Resource Library. We do have some resources there that you can find. Also, if you want to like a couple other like housekeeping-ish things, also if you want to join, if you are on this webinar, you probably already are on our listserv. But I'll also drop the link here for folks who want to get on the Freedom Network listserv, then you can get more information, get our updates. Also, please take note of their email addresses in case you do have more specific follow-up questions and things like that. That would be great. I'm also going to drop an evaluation, speaking of research and evaluation, link here in the chat. We'll put this in this, so please, if you would, you shouldn't have to fill any, you should just be able, I'm a little bit twitchy because when we went through this, sent this out earlier, theoretically, you should not need to sign up for anything to fill out this survey, the post-evaluation survey that I just dropped in the link. If you do, send me an email. I'll put my email address here and I will mess around with it and make sure you get access to one that is not wonky. That's my email address in case that link does something weird because sometimes it didn't and sometimes it did. And I feel like technology is, you know, doing what it wants today. Um, oops. I will just stick around here for another couple minutes in case some more questions do pop in. Thank you so much, Martha and Cynthia, for your time. There's a lot of really good information in there, and I think this will be a really valuable resource. The PowerPoint in and of itself is a very, very valuable resource in how to walk folks through this process. I will also drop one other time the toolkit, the link to the toolkit itself, OVC's toolkit. Maybe. There you go. It's not a pretty link, but it should get you where you need to go. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, everyone. Thank you so much again, Martha and Cynthia. And I don't want to keep you all here if there are no further questions. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.